everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about Until April by Janet W. Ferguson. So, this one, it's a contemporary romance. It fits within the Christian fiction category. It's part of Janet's Coastal Hearts series, and it's a standalone story. So, this series, the books are connected by characters and story world, but they can effectively be read in any order without any spoilers. So, why did I want to read this one? Well, I've loved reading Janet's books in the past, and I've got a book recommendation for Star Rising that you can find at my website at narelleatkins.com. And I'm going to add my usual disclaimer and say many thanks to the author who provided an advanced reader copy, and all the opinions that I express in this episode are completely my own. So let's talk about the book. Until April by Janet W. Ferguson is set in Alabama. So we're on a small island called Dauphin Island, which is a barrier island in the Gulf. And we have a number of romance and women's fiction tropes in this one. So this story is a second chances romance, and we have a very complicated history between our main characters. Our leading lady is a single parent of the most adorable 3-year-old boy. He's so cute. And we have women's fiction themes looking at marriages and relationships. We have a lot of family drama in this one. We also have grief and loss. That's quite a large part of the story. So if you're triggered by grief and loss and find that a bit too much to read, then I would probably recommend putting this one aside and reading it later when you're not so sensitive to grief and loss. And the coastal setting, I just loved on the Gulf and the marine life. We have those elements in the story as well. It was very fun. So I'm going to share the first line from chapter 1, which is this one. This is freedom. And we have a lovely start to the book. So we meet Michael in chapter 1, and he's out on the Gulf with his brother jet skiing, having an absolutely fabulous time. It's a beautiful day, gorgeous out on the water. So I'm going to introduce you to Michael, who's our hero. He's 30 something in terms of his age, and he's for 10 years has worked as a marine educator, and there's an aquarium and a sea lab on the island where he works. So at the start of the story, as I said, he's single and carefree and really doesn't want to be held down with responsibilities, and there are reasons for why freedom's important to him. So in his childhood, in his family of origin, he was the caretaker and the fixer, and he was burdened with a lot of family responsibility at a young age that he's still got to unpack a whole lot of things that happened in the past. And his mum has a mental health condition that has really impacted the family for as long as Michael can remember. And so, as well as having emotional baggage from his childhood, he also has a former girlfriend that is still bothering him in terms of how things went with that relationship. And also, there are previous relationships he's had as well that he has baggage from. And he also, at the start of the story, doesn't believe in God and is quite skeptical about religion in general. And he's surrounded by believers and people of faith, which drives him crazy at times and he finds very frustrating. So it's quite interesting, some of the conversations he has in the story. So I'm going to introduce you to April, who's our leading lady. So she's a similar age to Michael. She actually went to college with him, and she's a school teacher by trade, and she has a 3-year-old son, and his name is Jack, and he's just adorable and cute. So at the start of the story, there's a major event that happens in chapter 1, and I'm not going to say what happened because it is a story spoiler, even though it happens in chapter 1. So if you're curious and want to know what I'm talking about, please go and read the sample of the book at Amazon or elsewhere where you can find the sample, and then you can find out for yourself what's happening. But I'm going to refer to this as a major event so that I don't spoil the story as well. It's really important that you don't work out what's happened because, yeah, for a whole bunch of reasons. I hate spoiling stories. And this is a spoiler that I wouldn't have wanted to know before I started reading. So something major happens in chapter 1 that has some pretty big implications for a whole lot of characters. And at the start of the story, April and Michael have been estranged for years, and it goes back to their college days. And even though they've both lived on the island, they've effectively avoided each other, even though it's a small community. And so what happens in chapter 1 puts them physically and geographically together at the same time in a very dramatic and unexpected situation. And that's where the story really kicks off because of the circumstances that draw them together. And so our meet cute, it is action packed, it's dramatic, it's a dynamite of a meet cute, and it's also very emotional. There's, as I said, it's a big thing that happens and there's a lot of stuff going on. And as soon as I read the opening chapters, I'm turning the page, turning the page, turning the page because it completely hooked me into the story. So we have a number of problems in this story, and a lot of it relates to the past and emotional baggage that both of our characters are carrying. So there's secrets from the past that will get revealed during the story, which will explain a lot. And April, from this major event that happens early in the book, there's a lot of problems that are generated from what has happened and also what that event exposes as well. And she also has a lot of financial difficulties that she will need to overcome and deal with in the story, and a lot of responsibilities. And she is effectively a single mum to a 3-year-old, and there's a lot going on with that. So we have family drama on pretty much all parts of the family. April's extended family is very complicated, and she doesn't have any support from her extended family in terms of raising her son, which is very unhelpful. But what she does have is a lovely church family who she can rely on, and friends that are really there for her when she needs them in a really big way, which is part of the story I just loved. So April and Michael, they have a shared past from their college days that is very complicated. And at the start of the story, there is a truckload of unresolved issues between these two that we learn about as we keep reading. So Michael has family drama, and a lot of that relates to his mum's mental health. And the condition she has is very complicated and it's ongoing. And the family kind of feel like there's no end point and there's no way to actually help her and to resolve the situation as well. So it's a very hard situation. And Michael's also in denial about a whole lot of stuff, things that have happened in the past. And he sort of has compartmentalized things and hasn't really processed how choices that he's made in the past, how those choices have negatively impacted him as well as other people. And that's something that he'll have to unpack and deal with in the story, because those decisions from the past do actually affect his present day life. And his family baggage also affects his decisions in his present day life as well. So I absolutely love the story. As I said, once I read that opening, I was there turning the page, and I read this book very quickly. It was very easy to read. And the Second Chances romance just had so much emotional depth. There were so many layers. There was a lot happening with these characters. And I just loved how we peeled off the layers to see what was really going on and why they thought and did the things that they did. And I would describe their romance journey as being friends to more with a twist, because there's a few things that happen that, again, I'm not going to talk about because even though they're tropes that I could talk about, they would really spoil the story. So you're going to have to read the story to find out what I'm talking about. But I just love their romance journey. It was fun. It was challenging. There was a lot of conflict and a lot of issues to overcome. And I just really enjoyed journeying with the characters on their happily ever after journey, because Michael and April were such fun characters. And Jack, the adorable 3-year-old, I love kids in books, and he was just adorable. Everybody loved Jack. He was so cute and so true to life. And I loved how Michael bonded with Jack during the story as well. That was really fun to read. And the small town community and the church community that I mentioned earlier, I loved how they pulled together to help the characters as well and to help each other. That was a really cool thing to read. And in terms of the grief and loss that I've mentioned, it was handled with great sensitivity. And there are multiple characters who were dealing with grief or loss in some way, shape, or form as well. So there was a lot of stuff going on in the book, but it was handled beautifully and very sensitively, and it was all beautifully written. And the emotional depth, we see the raw emotions in terms of what's going on with the characters. We also see them faced with some pretty hard issues that they're trying to navigate and deal with, and some very difficult choices. So sometimes you can be in a situation where there's really no good option. It's the best of a whole bunch of not so great options. And we saw that happen in the story as well, and the characters having to live the consequences of the decisions that they make. And the secrets in the past also had some pretty big consequences that they were dealing with in the present day. And I just love this coastal setting on the island and the marine life and experiencing that with the characters. It was just so much fun. So I'm going to share my favorite book quotes, and I have two from this book, and this is the first one. The wave she thought would swallow her whole, God used to guide her into safe harbor. So this is April who's thinking this, and it's really quite a good metaphor for her faith journey in the book and how she really gets into herself into situations, some of them within her control, some of them circumstances that have put her into hard places, and how she really needs to draw on her faith and rely on God during the story. And here's my second quote. Do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. And again, this is April who's thinking about this. And if you recognize this quote, it is from the Bible. It's a fragment of a Bible verse. And I love the message from this particular quote because the story, even though the characters are dealing with some really hard things that have happened and grief and loss, there's also a lot of hope. And holding on to hope is a very big theme in the book. So I would describe this one as having strong and relevant faith elements that are very organic to the story and really come from the characters and their journeys. And as I said, grief and loss was also addressed from a faith perspective. And we see the characters living their faith and relating to each other, they're supporting each other, they're doing very practical things in terms of helping each other, and they're also praying together. And I just really love that faith community that we see in the story. And we also had some interesting discussions with Michael and a few characters about things like maths and science and creation. And those conversations were really interesting and fun to read as well. And we have faith themes that look at the importance of truth and honesty. We have characters that are dealing with trust issues, and we have forgiveness themes. And with Michael in particular, we really have his redemption journey on the page and how he's wrestling with a whole lot of issues. And we'll also need to look at forgiveness and things like that as well as part of his faith journey in the story. So, in terms of the impact on me, there were lots of smiles because this was a really fun romance. It was a sweet and cute story, and there were so many things that I just loved. And especially when you've got an adorable toddler, there's always some entertaining things that will happen and lots of fun moments. But at the same time, because it was dealing with some hard issues, there were some poignant moments in the story that were in places quite hard to read as well. And there were some really difficult circumstances that the characters were dealing with that did make me think as well in terms about what was going on. So, in summary, I would recommend Until April to readers who like second chances romances, to readers who like friends to more romance storylines where you've got a bit of a twist on the friends to more trope that's quite interesting, to readers who like the single parent romance trope and family drama and the coastal marine setting in the story, to readers who like small towns with a faith community that supports the members of the church, as well as just being a really loving, caring place. I think the faith community really was a standout in this book, and we, as I said, we got to see the characters living their faith. And if you like books that deal with grief and loss in a really sensitive way, and in a way that has hope from what's going on as well, where the characters can actually move through grief on their grief journey and move to a better place, then you'll like this one. And if you like your contemporary romances with strong and relevant faith elements that deal with redemption and forgiveness themes that are very organic to the story, then you'll like this one. Thanks for joining me today. Does Until April sound like a book that you'd like to read? Have you read it? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening at the podcast, you can send me a text via a link in the show notes. If you're watching at YouTube, you can like the episode at YouTube and or leave a comment at YouTube. You can also email me at my website where I have a contact form, and you'll find that at narelleatkins.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, and you can do that at your favorite podcasting app, or you can subscribe at YouTube, and then you'll get a notification on when my next episode drops. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share the link with a friend, especially a friend who enjoys reading contemporary romance and a friend who you think would like reading Janet's book and her series. So thanks for tuning in and see you next time.